Welcome, everyone. We are expecting a big group of 300 today. So thank you for joining right on time. I would love to just start with some opening remarks before we get right into a fast-paced 30-minute briefing. My name's Nina Oslu-Tunjali, and I'm the Executive Director of the Americans for the Arts Action Fund. And I want to welcome all of you today for your interest in what's happening in Washington and how it might impact you back home, and specifically the arts. This is our first briefing in what will be a quarterly series of political insider briefings for our Arts Action Fund members. And if you're not a member yet, because it was forwarded to you to join or to listen in, we welcome you, but we also encourage you to join for free so that you'll get your own personal invitation directly for these kinds of programs and briefings like today. For our purposes, I want you to know that today's briefing will be recorded, but it's being recorded for archival purposes because I heard from many other members that they couldn't arrive right at this exact time and day to watch it live. And so they wanted the option to be able to listen to it afterwards. So we will be posting this live recording in about 1 hour on the landing page for today's insider briefing on the Arts Action Fund website. And Morgan, who you can raise your hand, Morgan. Morgan is with the Arts Action Fund, and she just posted where that landing page will be, where you can see it and rewatch it in an hour from now. She's also your person if you have any kind of technical difficulties. You will see that you have all joined on mute. And what I'd like you to do is, if you have questions, to post it in the chat room. And I'm going to do my best to aggregate common questions and be able to pose them. We only do have 30 minutes. We're testing how much we can do in 30 minutes. But what we're going to do is I'm going to take those questions afterwards and I'm going to create an FAQ. And sometime tomorrow, you'll see answers to those questions we didn't get a chance to ask live today, so that we will answer your questions. And I just can't guarantee it'll be in these 30 minutes, but please post your questions. We really want to see what you're thinking and what's on your mind. So today we have two really important political insiders that work with the Arts Action Fund. The first one will be Lyndon Boozer, who will be joining us momentarily because he's actually on a different meeting negotiating cryptocurrency policies with the White House. Very exciting, but he's also a great arts lover. So he's going to join us in just a few minutes, and he's going to focus on the possibility of the government shutdown. What are the current deals going on right now? What are the possibilities? And if there is something that happens, how long it will last, and if it will reoccur in just a few more weeks because we still haven't gotten things done yet. So he's going to go into that detail. Just to give you an oversight, today is September 26th. The fiscal year for the federal government ends on September 30th. That is a truism for every year. And so every appropriations bill that has to happen by September 30th. Typically, it does not happen. And what they do is something called a temporary continuing resolution, a CR, he'll probably refer to it as. And that gets Congress through and gives them a few more weeks, maybe even a few more months, to be able to pass those individual appropriation bills so that we have a completed appropriation cycle. And our second speaker, Bill Harper, who is a political consultant to the Arts Action Fund, a partner in Harper Downing, and most previously, longtime, double-decade chief of staff for Congresswoman Betty McCollum, who is probably one of the best arts champions on Capitol Hill. We're thrilled to have him with us as well, and he'll talk a little bit about that appropriations process and things to expect down the line. So let me first do a quick check to see if Lyndon has joined us, and it doesn't look like he has, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do then is first give a little bit of detail about what we're hearing, and then go to Bill if Lyndon hasn't joined us yet. So just recently, the Office of Management and Budget released a report of how every federal agency plans to deal with the shutdown, because theoretically, all government agencies will need to shut down except for those that are considered essential employees and essential work like military. And what happens in those situations is those folks are actually working without pay with the hopes of getting back pay when the bill gets funded. But they still won't get a paycheck when it's due. And that's a very hard situation. I'm going to, and in fact, Morgan has already posted on the chat, the last thing that's in the chat room is a really interesting document that is published by OMB, Office of Management and Budget, on how every federal agency plans on working through the shutdown. And it's so interesting because it's different for every federal agency. And I'm just going to give you an example. The National Endowment for the Arts has 145 employees, but because they have leftover money from FY23 and from other sources, some of them even private sources, some of it's still COVID relief money, they are able to keep all 145 employees working, administering grants, sending out money for awarded grants. So we don't expect an interruption at the NEA, but you go over to its sister agency at the National Endowment for the Humanities, and it's going to be so interesting when you click on that link because it's an alpha order, just find it. And you'll find that probably close to 85% of staff have to be furloughed over there. This is no fault of any federal agency. It's just how they manage and do their work. Nobody expects a shutdown. So in this case, what's happening at the NEH is much more typical of what would happen. And I'm actually going to ask Bill to jump in here, who has worked on the congressional side of what happens during a shutdown.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Nina. This is a time of great uncertainty for congressional staff, federal employees, and particularly on the federal agency side, they have been preparing for the potential of a shutdown for weeks, if not months, which creates a great deal of stress and really lowers productivity. I know on congressional staff, people I'm talking to, this is all they're focused on right now, is what's going to happen this week and what's going to happen if we actually do go into a shutdown. So this is a time of great uncertainty, and even members of Congress, I can tell you, nobody knows what's going to happen for the next 4, 5, 6 days. So I'm looking forward to hearing from Lyndon because he may have some unique insights into where this is all going. Nina, would you like me to jump into some of the appropriations background?
Yes, please do.
So there are 12 appropriation bills. The U.S. Senate has passed all 12 of their bills out of committee. None have passed on the floor. The U.S. House has passed 10 of the 12 out of committee. One has passed on the floor. But passing those bills right now for fiscal year 2024 is not going to help prevent the shutdown. As Nina said, it's going to take a continuing resolution to continue to fund the government at either current 2023 levels, or depending on what the continuing resolution says, some variation of 2023 levels. In the past, continuing resolutions have been passed for weeks. Nina said sometimes months. We could see there's discussions about potentially passing something through the end of November, end of October into early November. I think the goal here is to try and reach an agreement that would allow an omnibus appropriation or several minibus appropriations to be passed before the end of the calendar year. With regard to specific arts funding, the appropriation bill, the Interior Environment Appropriation Bill, contains the funding for the National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for the Humanities. The Senate has maintained flat funding from fiscal year 2023 at $207 million. That's $4 million shy of the president's recommended budget of $211 million for each agency. The House has come in somewhat lower at $185 million, despite the strong efforts of Chairman Mike Simpson of Idaho and the ranking member Shelley Pingree of Maine to really work in support of NEA, NEH funding. That is not surprising, and in fact, I think that's probably a better outcome than many other accounts in that bill and in other appropriation bills where deep cuts were made by Republican appropriators. So that gives the ability for conferees, when they come together for the conference committee, to hopefully attain that Senate funding level, or even try and go a little bit higher and match the president's budget. I know American for the Arts and the Arts Action Fund are strongly working behind the scenes to advance those higher funding levels. And we just have to wait and see where that goes as the rest of the fiscal year plays out.
Bill, let me ask if you could fill in some information about, so going back to basics of what it takes to pass a bill. It goes out of committee, it goes to the floor, and then that House version goes on. Why don't you continue it? It goes on the Senate. How many steps does it take, and how far away are we from that?
We're at a point right now where if we had a continuing resolution to continue to fund the government, I would expect that come end of October into November, that the staffs of the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate Appropriations Committee would start to discuss their respective bills, even though they haven't passed off the floor. As long as they've passed through committee, this gives them a working bill to be able to negotiate. And what the end game is really about the negotiation between the House and the Senate to find compromises and agree on final funding levels and other language in the bill. Okay,
great. And talk a little bit about the interesting twist of if a CR was passed, what does that really mean? It's passing at what funding level, and what's the little twist about the NEA on that?
Continuing resolution, if we get what they call a clean CR, a continuing resolution without any added language, the funding level for the National Endowments for the Arts and Humanities would continue at the fiscal year 2023 levels of $207 million.
Oh, yes.
So for 207, yes. So in many cases, for sustained government funding, passing a clean CR would be the optimum outcome for federal agencies, so that the current funding levels continue uninterrupted until the continuing resolution expires, which would be the date that the House and Senate would agree upon.
Got it. Thank you. Morgan, if you could post the link for the status of arts appropriation bills, and that will give folks an opportunity to see visually some of the things that Bill talked about current House funding level for FY24. And for those to just keep in mind, when we say FY24, meaning fiscal year 2024, that means October 1, 2023. It begins October 1, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. So it is not on a calendar year, it's on a special government fiscal year. And that's why we are at a 4-day, what's going to happen, because on September 30th, in 4 days, is the last day of fiscal year 23, and there is no authorized approved appropriations for October 1st, because it's still so far away from being processed. And so Morgan just posted the link for where we're sitting on that. And now our Arts Action Fund PAC leader, Lyndon Boozer, who's also a partner at Capitol Council and probably one of the most inside Washington political players that I know, has joined us. And Lyndon, if you could now share your latest insight and knowings about what might be happening with a government closure or a spending bill, which is it going to be?
Well, thanks, Nina. I really appreciate your hosting this call. Thank all of you for taking the time to join it. And Bill, thank you for your insightful analysis on the CR and the current state of affairs. I'm late because I was in a meeting with some senior staff, and unfortunately, things aren't looking very good. I mean, right now, the speaker is attempting to bring 4 appropriations bills to the floor through regular order, but they can't get the rule agreed to by the House Republicans. And if there's no rule, there's no legislation on the floor. Now, this has nothing to do with the operations of the government in terms of the funding for next fiscal year. These appropriations bills are for different departments of the government: Homeland Security, Ag, Defense, Labor, HHS. They're having trouble bringing these appropriations bills to the floor, much less figuring out how to keep the government open. I mean, right now, there's basically 3 options to keep the government open. There's the Senate option, which Bill may have touched on, with the FAA vehicle, which they would send over. They would pass in the Senate, send over to the House. There's the Republican CR, which is unlikely to happen because there's just not enough Republican votes for it. And then there's a third option, which is getting a lot of buzz, Nina, and that's the discharge petition, which has only been used twice since 1910. And that's where a majority of members of the House sign a petition to bring legislation to the floor. And maybe you mentioned this, maybe you didn't, but there's 2 Republicans who've already agreed to sign this, a discharge petition, with all the Democrats. There's lots of moderate, not lots, but several, I think it's 15 to 18 districts were carried by Biden that are Republican seats. I should know that number. I think it's 18, but it could be 15. Anyway, it's in that neighborhood. So these moderate Republicans are finally making their voices heard. And they're not going to let the Gateses of the world be the only voices in the House, because they have to get reelected too. So if they join with the Democrats and do a discharge petition, then that could be a vehicle to bring a continuing resolution to the floor and have the government reopen, because it does take 9 days, I believe, for the legislation to come to the floor, and then it would be voted out and adopted by the Senate. And that would probably be the CR would be at current spending levels. And I think the length of the CR, continuing resolution, would be 6 to 9 weeks. So it would be probably a couple of months, take us into November, December, possibly. So, I mean, right now, it is just very fluid. And I would say the chances of the government shutting down are pretty high. I'll probably put it at about 90%. And keep a 10% hope that we avert a shutdown, and I'm just not optimistic. So it's very sad to report this news because it will impact all aspects of our economy at a time when we're enduring, the auto worker strike, the SAG-AFTRA strike. There's just lots of challenges our country is facing right now. This is just really an unfortunate, sad moment in the capital city. And with that, Nina, did I miss anything? Do you think? I mean,
I have some questions for you.
Well, few people know as much about what's going on in this town as Nina. So go ahead and shoot away.
So could you give a little bit more information so folks understand? With probably more than enough members of the House to vote for a continuing resolution to avert a shutdown, with the great majority, if not all, Democrats and a handful of Republicans. Tell us the reasons behind what is preventing Speaker McCarthy from moving that to the floor.
It's really very simple. His speakership is on the line. The motion to vacate, where they can essentially strip him of his leadership. And you'll recall when they did the debt ceiling deal with Biden and a lot of Democratic votes, the far right of his caucus shut down the floor the very next week because they were very upset with the deal that he cut, even though it did reduce spending. Now, this is a deal that was voted through the Congress, and they're not honoring now. They actually want to move the goalposts, as they say. And so he is trying to hold on to his speakership and give them what they want. And so that's why he keeps changing these numbers and cutting spending so that they can be placated. But he also admitted in a fit of frustration that they want to burn the house down. They want to burn the house down. And so I think he's kind of reaching his limits, but he wants to hold on to his speakership, and that's why he is working only.
And
He is the minority leader, our top Democrat in the House, who has a good working relationship with Mr. McCarthy. You know, he brought a lot of votes to the debt ceiling deal. Josh Gottheimer, who is co-chairs the Problem Solvers Caucus with Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania. It's a group of equally divided Democrats and Republicans that vote as a bloc together, bipartisan. You know, they're ready to end the shutdown, but Mr. McCarthy wants to focus on his caucus first. But again, we haven't even started dealing with the shutdown legislation, Nina. They're still focused on the appropriations bills and getting a rule to bring them to the floor, which is the agenda for this afternoon. And so if you have C-SPAN, it's going to be very interesting on that rule vote to see if it goes through, because several rules have been defeated, and that rarely ever happens in Washington, where the majority party can't sustain the rule to bring their legislation. They wrote these bills; they're the majority to the floor. So it's really frustrating, and we don't know where this is going to end up and how it's going to turn out. I don't think Mr. McCarthy does. He's just giving it, the best that he can.
Let's talk a little bit about the discharge that is the leading possibility at the moment, and the significance of that, especially with when Speaker McCarthy became Speaker. One of the concepts that he agreed to with the further right of his caucus is that no bill should be passed where it's majority Democrats over Republicans in order to get it passed. How would a discharge work with that, and would it still jeopardize his speakership?
That's a good question. Frankly, from an insider's view, I would say it gives him some cover, because the issue is force. And I would welcome Bill's thoughts on this issue, because, discharge petitions are very rare. As I said, they've only been used twice in over 100 years. So, but they force the issue, and it's beyond the speaker's control. In
spite of the speaker, in fact, right?
Correct, precisely. So in some ways, if these other moderate Republicans decide to join, the two have already agreed to join the Democrats, it could be, it could give him some cover, if you will, with his right wing members. That's a very curious issue, and no one really knows how Congressman Gates and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and some of the other members from that wing would react. There hasn't been any comments on it, because they just haven't reacted to it yet. It's really kind of come to life this week, and there's nothing McCarthy can do about it. And it would sort of force the issue. So that's why I do think it's a possibility, as rare as it is, and would be very interesting optics for the House. But
yeah.
The Democrats are ready to move forward, because they want to avert a shutdown.
Yeah,
and
Bill,
govern.
Bill, would you like to add anything about that maneuver of a discharge?
A discharge petition means that the majority party and the speaker has lost control of the House. And the fact is that they've already lost control of the House. When you can't pass a rule, that is a majority vehicle that rarely gets a dissenting vote. It is not, passing a rule simply means that it will allow debate to take place on the floor. It's not a vote on substance. It's simply allowing the bill to come to the floor to be debated. So when you can't pass a rule, and then you're forced to have a bill on the floor via a discharge petition, it means that the majority party, the speaker, has lost control of the body. So I view that as a situation in which the speaker's between a rock and a hard place right now.
Yeah.
And his prospects for hanging on, I think, are really diminishing day by day.
And Bill, based on this concept that it takes 9 calendar days to get a discharge petition to the floor, if they were to even begin acting on this, it's not going to happen today, but the best scenario is today. Does that mean we are looking at the end of the first week of October for the shutdown to happen?
No, it means that the shutdown happens
No.
12:01 on October 1st. It means that 9 days before the House could act on the discharge petition, send a vehicle to the Senate, and then, work from there to shut it down.
Okay, so let me get a clarification. They can't request a discharge until October 1st?
Oh, they could start, they don't have the votes to request it. They don't have the majority. They need more Republicans to sign the discharge petition.
Right.
They're 3 or 4 Republicans short of having the discharge petition activated. And then it's something called it has to ripen. And then it will come to the floor for a vote. But they don't have sufficient votes yet.
Right. And because of this 9 days, that's why I said, like, even if they got the petition moving, we're looking at 9 days before they can reopen the government, because it will shut down on October 1st.
I would say longer than 9 days, because then the Senate has to act, and that takes a day or two, and then it goes to the president. So, we might be looking at up to 2 weeks of a shutdown.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly go to a few questions, probably take just another 2 or 3 minutes of your time before we wrap up our half-hour power session here. One question is about for organizations who receive funding from state arts agencies that received it originally from the NEA, how will they be impacted? The good news is that money has already been dispersed to the state arts agencies, so they are not impacted by a federal shutdown. Additionally, even if they had been impacted, they're not going to be impacted because the NEA is still going to have the ability to keep all their staff working and getting money out the door for those who finish their final reports and things like that. So this is one of the few agencies, and I'm really proud of it, that are going to be able to handle this shutdown. I don't know for how long they have that money for, but at least for the foreseeable future, they're in good shape. But if there's anything you need to get done, you want to be sure of it, you have a question to ask or something like that, I'd say get it done before Friday. There was another question about how are things working on the Arts Education for All Act, which is a bill that was introduced by Congresswoman Bonamici in the House last week. And that is a policy bill. That is not an appropriations bill. So it's not impacted by these appropriation bills not being funded. So work can continue. The only problem is that not all congressional staff will be working during a shutdown. As Bill has told me, it is dependent on every congressional office if they deem all of their staff essential workers. And if they do, they're working, but it's going to be sluggish and not going very well. So there will be a slowdown, but not a stop on movement for that bill. And then there's another question here about, can you give us numbers on how many votes would be required for discharge petition or other options?
Majority.
And what's that majority number?
Yeah, 218 standard, but I believe there's a retirement, so maybe 217.
Yeah, in Utah.
Typically.
Right, there's a retirement in Utah, so there's one missing.
And a Rhode Island, and there's an open seat in Rhode Island. So it's 216 or 217 is the majority.
Right, and there are
you're right about Rhode Island.
About how many Democrats are there in the House?
211 right now.
211. So you're looking at about 5. That's why you've heard both speakers refer to the number 5 Republicans needed to pass a petition discharge.
And two have committed.
Okay, and 2. So we need just 3
to
more.
It.
Right.
Correct.
And then
that's not a lot because it. Go ahead.
I'm just going to move it to the Senate and ask a quick timely question. You've all read in the news, Senator Menendez has been indicted on some charges, and there have been calls for his resignation. The Senate is in a very tight majority with Democrats at 51, Republicans at 49. Lyndon, could you just tell us what you think what might happen there and what impact would it have on future votes and legislation?
Well, it is. That's why Senator Schumer, the majority leader, described Senator Menendez as a public servant, a dedicated public servant, when he, I wouldn't say threw him a lifeline, but his initial reaction was, let's see where the facts lead and let's keep an open mind. Since then, the facts have certainly, or not the facts, but sort of the appearances have certainly not inured to Senator Menendez's benefit. He did a press conference yesterday. And since that press conference, a number of other senators have come out and asked him to resign. Senator Brown, Senator Fetterman, Senator Welch from Vermont, and really significantly, Senator Cory Booker, who had been holding out. And so, there is a lot of the congressional delegation. Now, remember, New Jersey has off-year elections. So New Jersey has an election in November, this upcoming November. And so there's a lot of jockeying going on for a lot of these statewide office holders, which is, the governor, of course, came out very quickly and asked for his resignation. I know Bob Menendez personally, he's a fighter. I mean, this does not look good. And I think that to your question about, the majority of the Senate, it's a 51-49 Senate. If he were to resign, it'd be a 50-50 Senate and even tighter. So I think part of Schumer's thinking was, let's just see where, we have a justice system in our country. Let's see what the court system, how this plays out. Let's, go to trial and let's see if there's an explanation, for these allegations, and just see where the cards fall. But, there's lots and lots of pressure right now for him to resign. Do I think he will resign soon? Probably not. He probably wants to use his seat as a plea bargain with the Justice Department to lessen the charges or the allegations. And that's what he's called them, allegations. He said, in this country, we're innocent until proven guilty. But I mean, gold bullion's cash. I mean, it doesn't look good, but I've recommended to everyone, take a breath and let's just see where the facts go. And let's see what our justice system determines.
And if he were to resign, I think it would go to a 50-49, which would still possibly give the Democrats the majority in the Senate if that's a status quo. Is that right?
Yeah, that's actually where I said 50. Yeah, 50-50. But yeah, but Murphy would, the governor would get to appoint a senator, and it'd be a Democrat, obviously. So I don't know how quickly that would happen, but I don't expect the senator to resign anytime quickly. Just knowing him like I do, he fought, another indictment which had a hung jury determination. So, he said, I'm not planning on going anywhere. Not, and as Jim Clyburn said on Meet the Press, he said, this is an issue for the people of New Jersey to decide and the court system. And so, the people of New Jersey, want him to resign. I think they'll make their opinions clear. But right now, what you're hearing from is a lot of politicians, other senators, in New Jersey, statewide office holders. So that's a lot of pressure. But, he's never succumbed to pressure. And I wouldn't expect him to anytime soon. That's just my personal opinion.
Thank you. Let me just ask, Bill, do you have any final words as we close out?
I just want to thank everybody on the call for their support, both on the policy, but also on the political side. Both Democrats and Republicans, we need good people in Congress and the U.S. House and Senate to be advocating for the arts, to be advancing these policies, making investments in the arts. And as the 2024 election cycle has already started, people are out there. So I'm hoping that over the course of the coming year, we can have a very big, active presence by the arts community across the country, supporting good people who are running for federal office, who are going to be out there advancing arts and cultural issues. So, nobody does it better than Nina and the Arts Action Fund. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you. And before I close out, I see one important question about visas for artists. That will have a definite slowdown. Look at the Department of State's OMB report on USCIS. The White House has also referenced USCIS as a definite slowdown in processing during a shutdown. It won't be zero, but it'll be close to zero. So keep that in mind for all of you who are planning on presenting an international artist at a group in your community. Thank you, everybody. I look forward to hearing whether you like this and if there's anything else that you want to hear, but we'll be back next quarter to present a power briefing for you again. Thank you.
And keep supporting the Americans for the Arts Action Fund.
Yes. Morgan, post that last link of where they can do that. Thank you, everyone.